You're listening to the Free to Be Mindful podcast, which provides bite-sized tips for busy parents, educators, and anyone working with kids. These real talk conversations focus on mindful living, mental health, and personal growth, helping all to learn, grow, and inspire with mindfulness in mind. I'm your host, Vanessa de Jesus Guzman, educator, licensed professional counselor, entrepreneur, and mom. I'm passionate about helping folks live life with peace of mind and ease of heart while not losing their, well, you know, here we go. Hi, and welcome back to the Free to Be Mindful podcast. I hope that you're feeling good, looking good, and doing better in this world than you were yesterday. So sometime this summer, I connected with Christie from the Sassy Says Podcast. We had a super juicy conversation in all things mindfulness and therapy in regards to kids and in regards to moms. The conversation was so juicy that we spoke for nearly an hour. It aired on the Sassy Says podcast in November, and Christie was gracious enough to share the audio so that you can listen here on the Free to Be Mindful podcast as well. So if you're a faithful Free to Be Mindful listener, I know that you're used to the bite-sized episodes, usually 20 minutes and under. So for your convenience, I have went ahead and broke the podcast into 3 parts. So today you're going to be listening in to the second of 3 parts where we discussed a few things, including why I became a therapist, school counseling versus private practice counseling. Why would you want to take your child to therapy? How therapy plays a part in various cultures, tips on when your own child goes to therapy, and managing your child's big feelings. I hope you have lots of fun listening into the conversation. Here we go.
I want you to talk a little bit about why you became a therapist. I think that story is definitely worth sharing here.
Okay. I remember, I think it was my second or third year teaching. I used to teach second grade. And I don't even know what was happening prior to the situation, but it was something that happened so fast. And one of my kiddos, he swung a table that kind of like flipped and almost hurt another student. And I had to physically restrain him. And thankfully, the district had already taught us how to do that in a safe way. And he was a bigger kid, for second grade. So it was tough. Thankfully, it was the end of the day. All the students left, and the administration came and they were able to help me with the student. And then that was it. But I remember afterwards, my tears just coming out because I never thought that as an educator, as a teacher, I'd have to physically restrain a kid. And it was thereafter where I started thinking, do I want to do this forever? While still noticing this is my thing. I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. I always knew since kindergarten I wanted to work with kids. I really think that's what I was put on this earth to do. But I noticed that I had more of an interest of how that kiddo turned out afterwards. I had more of an interest in talking to the school counselor where I worked and how she was helping the kids more so than understanding like the math curriculum, even though that was important. But I saw that my passion was pulling me in that direction. And after that instance, then that's when I enrolled in a grad program to become a school counselor. And once I was in the program, and even once I was a school counselor, it's amazing how the different types of relationships that you can build with kids inside the classroom, but when it's outside of the classroom and they don't have the expectation of this person is trying to teach me, math or science or language arts, but this person is really trying to connect with me. I thrived on that whole process, on that whole experience. However, I saw that a little bit of a stop sign because in a school you could only go so far. It's only until how you're helping the child reach academic success.
Interesting.
And a lot of these kids needed so much more. And that's when I knew I not only want to help kids in a school, but I also want to have my own practice after school because I have the time for that, and then can go into those deeper levels of helping kids out, with their mental health in a different way than you can in a school.
Yeah. I'm wondering, now, so having worked with kids as a school counselor and now having a private practice, how is the work for you different, other than, I know you just said, in school you can only really go so far in terms of their academic achievement and what you're there to do, like almost like stay in your lane.
Right.
But I'm wondering, I guess what I'm getting at is to have to work with kids in your private practice, you have to, I guess, have parents who are open to therapy. I mean,
Absolutely.
not everyone is. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering, what are the types of parent, like, I don't know, what kind of parent is open to therapy? Like, what's going through their minds? Is it their traits or what? Like, what? I don't know. You're nodding, so I feel like you get me, but I don't really
I
know how
completely
I don't know how to ask what I want to ask.
completely understand your question. And I will share with you that before in that gap, being a school counselor and having my own private practice, I've worked for an agency doing in-home therapy. So
Interesting.
I will say that when I had the in-home experience, sometimes it was something that had to be done because of the Division of Children and Family Services,
Hmm.
and it wasn't perhaps something that a parent signed up for. Sometimes it was voluntary, sometimes it was not.
Mm.
So I've worked with families where sometimes it's resistant, and I was in their home at that,
Oh my
right? So it's
goodness.
kind of like, all right,
Woo!
this lady's here
Giddy
again.
up.
Yeah, like let's try to, let's just hope the hour goes fast.
Hmm.
So I've worked with that type of family, and I still love it, and they have a place in my heart because all families need help, in some way or another, but especially when there's a mental health need. But in a private practice, yes, I am working with parents who see the value, who are willing to pay out of pocket, who are willing to take time out of their schedule and their child's busy schedule because they see the value in counseling and they know that their child can grow or can make a change. And sometimes it's for them, sometimes it's for the parent child relationship. So I have a lot of sessions where I bring families in with their child. Sometimes they're littles, as I say, like 7, 8, 9.
Hmm.
Sometimes they're bigs, 15, 16, 17. And we have a session together. And
Hmm.
it is a beautiful thing once the session is done and you see how the energy shifts between, when especially having a teen, right? The teen on one side of the couch and the parent on the other, and everybody has a
Yes.
face on.
Yes.
And then by the end, where they really come to an understanding in the way that they communicate, come
Hmm.
to an understanding in the way that they listen to each other, as opposed to just wanting to respond, and really coming to an understanding of, I get you, and I'm willing to make these changes in order to get you more and have you get me more.
Hmm.
So there is a difference in working with, out of a school where just academic, in home where sometimes they don't want you there, and then in a private practice where, you're getting paid outside of a school to do something more.
Yeah. What are some of the common instances that a parent would feel moved to have their child see a therapist?
Yeah. I always say if you see your child's everyday life being impacted by something else that's happening, so they're no longer, perhaps if they were happy, or even if they were kind of like, a little bit flat, if anything about them changes because something is impacting their everyday attitude, then you got to do a little bit of a deeper dive. Like what's happening in school, what's happening at home, what's happening in their personal lives. And if you can't get to that at home on your own, that's when coming to therapy is a good idea. And
Mm.
it doesn't mean that your child has to have depression or anxiety. Sometimes that is the case. Sometimes it's as simple as your child's having a hard time navigating social relationships in school,
Mm.
or having a hard time navigating having a really tough teacher that year, or really putting high expectations on themselves, or sometimes it's a family
Mm.
putting high expectations on the child and not even noticing. So not everything is a super diagnosable case, but
Mm-hmm.
you can still seek outside help in different types of instances.
Yeah, I think that is, in my view, and I would be curious your opinion, one of the most common misconceptions about therapy is that something has to be wrong with you, something traumatic has to have happened by, and when I say traumatic, I mean generally accepted trauma, the
Right.
big ones, not just like you said. I mean, having a tough teacher for a little kid, that could be traumatic.
Yeah.
Do you, I mean, would there be any other misconceptions about your work or about therapy that you'd want to add to that?
I think there are different misconceptions, not just in general society, but also in different cultures as well.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas, oh, we can't go talk to anybody else, and that means my kid is crazy, and my kid's not crazy. I'm not crazy.
Right.
Or that means I'm a bad parent, or I failed somehow. I failed my kid somehow, and I'm not supposed to ask anybody else for help because we're supposed to just have it.
Yep.
Or that means that, my own mom and dad, right? Or my child's grandparents, that means that they're not helping me enough, or perhaps our church or community is not helping
Mm,
us enough. So there's a lot of different things that sometimes stand in the way, hurdles that stand in the way of families making that step to start to seek out therapy. And I always start my very first session always with letting families know, I know I'm a stranger right now and you're about to spill your guts to me. I acknowledge that
yeah.
because it is hard to take that first step. But once you find somebody that you connect with and that your kid connects with, and that might or might not be the first person you talk to,
Yeah.
but once you find that and you see those small, levels of success, those small changes that you perhaps may be making or your child may be making, then you've made, the right decision for your kid or for yourself.
Yeah. And as you were talking culturally, I'm also thinking generationally, right? I
Yeah,
mean, just as we go on, each generation gets more and more open to therapy, mental health, just learning so much more about it and realizing that it's not this taboo, scary world. It's real life. It's just being willing to open yourself up and look at it and talk about it.
absolutely. I'm first generation, and sometimes my parents
Mm.
still ask me like, "Well, what are you helping people with?" And like, people are actually paying you for this? And I'm like, "Yeah, they are. Like, you've raised me well, and school was great.
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing."
Yeah, well, I'm sure I'm sure that that I'm sure that that's been hard for you too at times, right? I mean, just having your own parents not understand fully what you're going through, and what you
Yeah.
do. I mean, I feel like I've had that a little bit, right? My mom is was always very let's talk, let's do this. We were very close, and um, she always talked to me about spirituality and things like that. So she's very open. But in this past year, I've struggled a bit with depression, anxiety, postpartum, a little bit, and I think what I'm learning and what maybe she isn't as hip with
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
is that it's not really an illness.
Right.
It's just life.
Yes.
I feel like sometimes she, as close as we are, she can have these kind of kid gloves on with me, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm just having a day. I'll be fine tomorrow.
Yeah, and we all go through different things throughout our lives. Again, it doesn't mean that you need to be in therapy forever, but we all can think of different things,
Yeah.
whether it be, perhaps some going away to college or, going into the
Yeah.
workforce or transitional changes, or if we've lost somebody that we love, just different things in our lives that we can think of, perhaps I needed, perhaps talking to someone else would have helped me more than just me doing it on my own.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Do you have any advice for parents who are saying, "Okay, I want to take my kid to see a therapist or just explore this best practices for the parents if they're not going to be attending the sessions with the kids?" I mean, do you find is it something that they should be talking to them about, asking them about after, leave it leave it to you and them? What are some best practices for the parents with having a child seeing a therapist?
Yeah. I'll say before answering that direct question, even before making the decision to reach out to a therapist, my tip would be turn off the outside noise,
Mm,
right? So forget what Instagram is saying, forget what your friends are saying, forget
yeah.
even a moment, perhaps what your family may think of it, and just do what you feel in your heart and in your soul that your child needs.
Mm,
And if that's going to therapy, then go to therapy and find somebody that
so
works for you
important.
and works for your kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes that outside noise can be really loud and then kind of cloud our judgment and our calls that we would make otherwise.
Hmm.
So when your kid is going in, and this is a question that I get often from parents, even before sometimes they come in and they say, my child needs therapy, but I haven't told them that I was meeting with you yet. So what do I do? And for that, I personally, like on my website, I have a page that's a kids only page so they can get to meet
I've
me
seen
and
that.
understand a little bit of
Hmm.
what therapy is and how things go and how we start and how we end. And I also stress confidentiality because with kids, especially tweens and teens, they want to make sure that I'm not going to be sharing with their parents what they're telling me. And I make a case for that with the parents as well, that you're not going to be told word for word of what your child is saying, but I do share general themes with getting
Okay.
your child's permission at that, because your child is the client. So I let my parents know that and let the kids know that. So with that's with older ones. With littles, I just have parents tell the kids, it's somebody who helps out with feelings, right? So, and sometimes they know most likely what a school counselor is in school. So it's like a school counselor, but outside of school. And that's like an easy way to get kind of a kid through the door of, I'm going to go see this lady or this guy or whomever. And this is what they're going to be helping me with.
Mm.
As far as after sessions, sometimes they really see that time, kids see that time as their own time. And imagine if you yourself had a therapy session and then your parent or your partner or spouse or friend said, well, how'd it go? And what'd you talk about? It would be kind of like an intrusion of your privacy.
Yes.
So you can also, how it went. And if they just say good, then just keep it moving, and understanding that someone who works with children will involve the parents and will let you know how things are going at appropriate times. So you're not completely left in the dark if you're taking your child to counseling.
Mm.
Hopefully that all made sense.
It did. I'm sure that that is so hard for parents. We want to know everything, right? I mean, we just want to
Yes.
know what's going on in those little brains. What age group do you have the most experience with within your private practice?
Um, right now it's a little bit of everything. I think I have the most kind of 7 to 10, and then later on 15 to 17 at this very moment. That always changes.
All right, so just because this is my show, my kids are much younger. My oldest is 3.5, but thinking about them getting older, wanting them to feel like there's this open line of communication between them and me, wanting that our home and our relationship to be a safe space for communication. Do you have any advice that I could start to implement now, or when do we start to implement whatever it is you're about to tell me I do to make that happen?
Yeah. And I mean, we can start implementing things as soon as our kids are like 6 months old. So it starts early as far as really enhancing things to grow their emotional intelligence. So with a baby, and we do it naturally without putting a label of this is, working on emotional intelligence. So we look at them, we smile,
Mm.
we goo goo gaga, right? Or whatever, baby thing it is that we do. And in that same communication, our kids are learning how to read our facial expressions, how
Mm.
to read our body language, how to read when my parent smiles, I smile back, and then they go crazy for it. So they're making all of these connections from the time that they're babies. Toddlerhood, which is sometimes
I'm
can be a
like,
monster.
I'm struggling. I'm struggling. Toddlers are tough.
They really are tough. And I laugh because as I think back at my experience, I always say I myself am not perfect and I myself lose my marbles as well. So I definitely have had
Mm.
those moments that I'm like, the banana just broke in half. Why is he on the floor
Bananas
throwing a
are the
full on
worst
tantrum?
fruit on the face of the earth. The strings, do you want it cut up? Do you want to eat it whole? The skin when they're done. It's a whole thing,
Anything. If
bananas.
they have like the brown spots in the
Oh
middle
my
of the
god.
thing.
Forget it. And you
So
can't
yeah,
even just cut the brown spot off. It's like the whole banana goes in the trash. It's horrible.
Yes. That's the first example that comes to mind when I
Yes.
think of when my kiddo was a toddler.
Yes.
So we first have to understand that they are irrational beings and that sometimes we cannot rationalize with them
Mhm.
when they have just lost it, right?
Mhm.
So understanding that sometimes us trying to talk sense into them when they are little incredible hulks, it's just not going to work. And that's when they just need mommy or daddy or whomever to hug them, to love them, and help them calm down emotionally so that they can think rationally. And then we have those conversations and not in a I told you so or
Mm.
didn't you hear what I said? I knew that was going to happen kind of way, but really giving them the words so that they can identify their own emotions. Because through our conversation, whether it be in this specific example or in any example, they are learning from us all the time. So if we say, you must be so frustrated because that banana has brown spots today. Right there, we're giving the word frustrated. And then they'll say, yeah, I am frustrated, or I am mad, or I wanted blank. And again, it takes
I
time.
know.
And sometimes you just want
Oh,
to pull your
I
hair
know.
out and keep it moving, but it's all a learning experience that they're getting from you. And then next time, perhaps they won't have the tantrum, and or perhaps they'll still smush down the smushy banana on the floor, but they may say, I'm so frustrated. And that in and of itself is a win
Mhm.
because then now they've used some words instead of just crying.
Right.
And little by little, the meltdowns, perhaps on this one topic, decrease. And they'll increase in another area, but they decrease in here and then they get more words from there. So I think talking to our kids so that they just hear the language, and also apologizing to them as
Mhm.
needed
Mhm.
because we make mistakes as well. So
Mhm.
when they see, wow, in our case, mommy's really mad and she yelled and she apologized, that will help them then apologize when they see that the situation calls for that. And in addition to that, even saying, mommy needs a timeout right now. And not in a timeout like go to the corner, think about what you've done,
Mm.
but I need space to take a deep breath because I'm so mad that I just need a moment. And it's
Modeling.
okay to, yes,
Yeah.
it's okay to verbalize that to our kids because we're modeling what to do. And then they in turn will know when I'm frustrated, I need a moment. So I'm going to do this, or I'm going to listen to music or blow some bubbles or take a walk so that I don't explode. And we'll talk about it as soon as that time is done.
Yeah. I I've I've heard this from you on your show before, and I've heard it from other people, and I know the things. I know the
It's
things.
hard
It's
though.
so hard. Oh,
I know.
it's
I
so
know.
hard, especially if, you know, it's become much harder now having the other kid in the dynamic because
Mm,
it's the push and pull constantly. If one is happy, the other one isn't, and then they influence the other one, and I just want to like just you have this side of the house, you have that side of the house. That doesn't work because he's 1.5 and he's a bulldozer. He just gets involved in everything. But it's
it's a juggling act.
I know. I think that's what's been most difficult for me is the juggling act of the two kids, the two dynamics, but also like we said with mindfulness, it's not going to work time number 1. And you know what? With toddlers, it might not work at time number 12 either. It's
Yeah.
just somehow you got to keep doing it.
Yeah. And understanding that at the end of the day, your kids may be mad at that moment, but they still love you no matter what. And you'll
Mm-hmm.
make mistakes and you'll lose your cool and you'll yell, but your kids will still love you and they'll know, hopefully that you still love them, but having that communication and letting them know that you care for them, apologizing when needed and having conversations of, well, I should have did this instead of that,
Yeah.
or next time I know that you will make this better choice instead of, the tantrum or whatever have you. It's really okay because that's what motherhood is, right? They
Yeah.
don't come with manuals. There's books upon books upon books that we read, but each kid is so
I
different,
know.
even within the same household, that we're just doing our best and we just get up the next day and continue to do our best because that's all we can do. So I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Please be sure to show Christy some love on her podcast called Sassy Says Podcast. And be sure to tune in next week for the final part of our 3-part conversation. And if you kind of forget sometimes to tune into your favorite podcast, you can simply hit subscribe or follow on your favorite platform so the episode can just pop up whenever a new episode is released. And as always, remember, in a world where you are free to be anything that you want to be, you are always free to be mindful. Thanks so much, and catch you next time. I hope you enjoyed this week's show. It would mean a ton if you took this moment to review the Free to Be Mindful podcast on the platform you catch your favorite shows. That quick and easy act lets me know what you enjoy, and it helps others find the podcast too. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you can listen along next week. In the meantime, I welcome you to catch me on social media at Counselor V de Jesus. And as always, remember, in a world where you are free to be anything that you want to be, you are always free to be mindful. Catch you next week.